Keir Starmer is caught up in a major and highly controversial lawsuit, one that threatens to expose his authoritarian nature as it accuses him of driving the elderly into poverty. If he loses this case, it could very well be the final nail in the coffin of his political career. So, what's the dark story behind this lawsuit? Stay tuned as we reveal the intriguing and dramatic details ahead. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for the latest updates on British politics.
Labour's biggest union backer, Unite, has applied to the High Court to try to overturn the cut in winter fuel payments.
To hear from him is that he's going to reverse the decision on the winter fuel allowance. It's a cruel policy, he needs to reverse it, and I'd like him to say that he's made a misstep and to reverse that policy.
The Labour Party's current foreign policy is about as useful as a chocolate teapot in a heatwave. Utterly disappointing and ineffective. Internal conflicts within the party are escalating relentlessly, leaving Keir Starmer caught in an endless web of infighting. What was once a unified organisation now resembles a chaotic mess, prompting dismay from anyone paying attention. The divisions within the party run deep, like cracks threatening to turn into gaping chasms. Starmer is struggling to strike a precarious balance between appeasing the left wing and attracting Conservative voters. Yet, this compromise has yielded no positive outcomes, only exposing the glaring weaknesses in his strategy. The left wing hasn't held back, accusing Starmer of abandoning the core values that have long been the foundation of the Labour Party. Meanwhile, the right wing remains sceptical, showing little trust in his conciliatory approach. Even MPs within the party are no longer staying silent. Some are calling for a return to progressive policies, emphasising that Labour can only reclaim its position by once again championing the working class. A mission Starmer seems to have forgotten. Rather than listening and taking decisive action, Starmer appears consumed by an impossible quest to please all factions, ignoring the party's fundamental issues in the process. The result? A sharp decline in active membership, an undeniable sign of growing dissatisfaction among the very people who once formed the backbone of the Labour movement. Traditional supporters who once placed their faith in the Labour Party now feel disillusioned and frustrated by Starmer's lack of decisive leadership. They're left questioning whether the party still represents the values and ideals they once held dear. Trust in Starmer isn't just waning, it's at risk of disappearing entirely. Within the party itself, critics argue that Starmer has failed to connect with the grassroots, while others worry he's steering Labour toward electoral disaster. These concerns aren't baseless. The Labour Party, once renowned for its strong and clear ideological stance, now resembles little more than a shadow of its former self. Starmer tries to be a leader who pleases everyone, but this very lack of decisiveness has caused him to lose the Labour Party's identity. How long can this continue before minor cracks turn into an irreparable collapse? Currently, party unity resembles a bag of cats, a chaotic and disjointed mess. Both the left and right wings of the party are dissatisfied with Starmer. The left accuses him of leaning too far to the right, while the right sees no reason to trust his leadership. Even his close allies have begun to voice their criticism. This situation is nothing short of a precarious tightrope act, with Starmer swaying, seemingly unsure when he might fall. In terms of foreign policy, if it can even be called a policy, it has been an outright disaster. Starmer remains bafflingly silent on major international issues, and when he does speak, his statements often feel like uninspired echoes of what the United States has already said. It's hard not to suspect he's either afraid to assert an independent stance or simply lacks fresh ideas to contribute. Starmer's cabinet has become something of a revolving door, with ministers coming and going at an alarming rate. The scandal involving Louise Hay is a prime example. Despite being fully aware of her past conviction, Starmer allowed the situation to spiral, further highlighting a careless and irresponsible approach to personnel management. Starmer's approval ratings are plummeting, indicating that the public is growing increasingly disillusioned with what he's trying to offer. It's like watching a slow-motion car crash. No one wants to look, yet they can't tear their eyes away from the unfolding chaos. The real question is whether Starmer is capable of leading the UK. Can someone who struggles to formulate a clear foreign policy and who can't even manage their own cabinet effectively be trusted with such a monumental responsibility? What's unfolding under Starmer's leadership feels like a textbook example of how not to govern, a political comedy of errors at best. What stands out most in the current climate is the deeply uncomfortable image of the British public witnessing their trust in Keir Starmer collapse. The Labour Party is now floundering amidst internal conflicts and aimless policy shifts, leaving the public to seriously question their ability to take on the responsibility of governance. Starmer, caught in the eye of this political storm, faces a monumental challenge to turn things around, but time doesn't appear to be on his side. Matters took a further dramatic turn when Unite, the largest union that once stood steadfastly by Labour, decided to sue Starmer over the winter fuel allowance cuts. This wasn't just a routine budget reduction. It was a move that pushed around 100,000 elderly people into poverty. As winter looms, the prospect of thousands of elderly people shivering in the cold due to Starmer's decision to slash heating aid is hard to stomach. Worse still, Unite alleges that his government bypassed necessary legal procedures before implementing the cut. Instead of proceeding with caution, they seemed eager to save a few pounds, ignoring basic principles such as adhering to the law. Sharon Graham, Unite's leader, did not mince her words, calling it pocket-picking the elderly. Such fierce criticism rarely targets the Labour Party, but this time it comes from their closest allies. It serves as a stark wake-up call about the severe decline within the party, a clear sign they are entering their political twilight. The winter fuel allowance, worth up to £300, might seem like a trivial amount to those well off, but for millions of people reliant on benefits, it is the difference between staying warm and freezing. Against this backdrop, the decision to cut the allowance is not just insensitive, but a blatant disregard for the most vulnerable members of society. So, what has Starmer done to address this crisis? Sadly, the answer is prolonged silence. The Labour leader's inaction has only fueled public outrage. When taken to court by the union, he was forced to confront tough questions instead of continuing to avoid the issue. It's deeply ironic that a party once celebrated for championing the rights of the underprivileged is now being accused of abandoning them. Cutting winter heating allowances during the coldest months is nothing short of a betrayal of the values they once claimed to uphold. The crisis doesn't end there. Labour's internal turmoil has worsened, with heated debates surrounding the assisted dying bill throwing the party into total disarray. It's like watching a slow-motion political train wreck, with no one able to halt the inevitable disaster. Within the party, MPs are deeply divided. Some support the bill, viewing it as an act of compassion and respect for human dignity, while others raise serious ethical concerns. This isn't a minor disagreement, but a fundamental clash of values, exposing glaring weaknesses in Starmer's ability to lead. Starmer's inability to take control of the situation only deepens doubts about his competence. If he cannot resolve disputes within his own party, how can he be expected to handle major decisions when leading the country? The Labour Party now appears to be a chaotic assembly where every MP acts in their own way without any cohesion. This bill is not just a legal issue, it's a test of the Labour Party's moral compass. Yet, instead of demonstrating competence, they exhibit an alarming lack of direction. If Starmer cannot address such a critical matter, what other weaknesses might he be hiding? This is the question that raises widespread concern. The chaos within the party extends beyond policies to personnel matters. Recently, Louise Hay, the former Shadow Transport Secretary, was forced to resign just months into the role after her history of lying to the police was exposed. The troubling part: Starmer was aware of this issue beforehand but still appointed her to a key position. This incident not only tarnishes the reputation of an individual, but also shakes public confidence in the stability of Starmer's cabinet. The pressing question is whether Starmer is genuinely capable of vetting key personnel. A cabinet lacking transparency and reliability cannot convincingly claim readiness to lead the nation. Starmer's oversight and judgment failures have handed the Conservatives a golden opportunity to attack. And who can blame them? A system that allows individuals with a history of dishonesty to pass scrutiny is hardly trustworthy. Is this negligence, or is the system so flawed it might as well not exist? Either way, the image of a party claiming to be ready to lead the nation has suffered significant damage. Currently, Keir Starmer's cabinet resembles a makeshift house, fragile and liable to collapse. Ministers depart in quick succession, scandals erupt one after another, creating the impression of an endless game of musical chairs, where every time the music stops, a new crisis emerges. This is yet another vivid example of the Labour Party's continual failures under Starmer's leadership. The rapid turnover of high-level positions has spiralled out of control, raising the question, is there anyone in this party competent enough to do the job? Or must the public endure yet another prolonged political farce until the next election? This state of turmoil not only highlights disarray within the cabinet, but also exposes alarming deficiencies in leadership. Immigration policy is another glaring example of Starmer's floundering and lack of direction. Previous criticisms of the Conservatives' open border policies now haunt him, as net migration hit a record 906,000 last year, the highest in UK history. His bold claims about reforming the visa system and tackling the exploitation of foreign workers sound resolute, but are ultimately hollow. Promises to penalise violating employers lack clarity in enforcement, rendering them empty words. As of September 2024, over 130,000 asylum seekers remain stuck in limbo. A significant number of people live in uncertainty, while Starmer's solutions remain little more than ink on paper. Despite attempting to project a tough stance on immigration, he adamantly refuses to impose limits on legal migration, creating a confusing and impractical contradiction. These actions not only erode public trust, but also raise serious questions about his capability to govern. Immigration figures are not mere data, but a ticking time bomb threatening Starmer's credibility and political career. His approach is akin to diffusing an explosive with toy scissors and duct tape. While public dissatisfaction grows louder, concrete plans remain conspicuously absent. On the international front, the situation fares no better. The decision to return the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, touted as a historic reconciliation move, has swiftly devolved into a diplomatic disaster. The islands, over which the UK had long claimed sovereignty, have become the focal point of disputes as Mauritius, which was forced to relinquish them in 1968, demands their return. Starmer's actions not only prompted Mauritius to call for an independent review of the agreement, but also sparked sharp opposition from the United States, the UK's top strategic ally. Advisors to Donald Trump, a potential future president, have warned that this move poses a potential security threat and urged Starmer to delay the decision. The result? Both Mauritius and Washington are displeased, turning this attempt at reconciliation into a serious international blunder. Domestically, concerns have emerged that this agreement might hand China greater influence amidst global geopolitical tensions. Adding to the turmoil, the International Court of Justice previously ruled that the UK's administration of the Chagos Islands was illegal and should end. Instead of finding a solution that satisfies all parties, Starmer crafted a deal that leaves everyone unhappy, transforming a gesture of goodwill into a catastrophic diplomatic failure. Beyond foreign policy, Starmer's welfare reform plan has also drawn widespread criticism. Initial promises to end the blame culture within the welfare system sounded promising. However, he then pivoted to pushing the rigid stance that anyone capable of work must do so. This contradictory approach leaves the public questioning whether this is genuinely a progressive policy or merely a rehash of outdated conservative thinking. The issues plaguing both domestic and foreign policy lay bare Starmer's lack of control. From a chaotic cabinet to disjointed policies, everything underscores the leader's lack of direction and competence. If there were ever a symbol of aimlessness in politics, Keir Starmer's name would undoubtedly top the list. Under his leadership, the Labour Party has transformed itself into a chaotic stage where conflicting policies and vague promises replace genuine strategy. Starmer and his team once promised to reform the welfare system, but their actions reveal an unsettling inconsistency. Liz Kendall, Shadow Secretary for Work and Pensions, oscillates between compassion and a hardline stance, insisting people must return to work. This lack of clarity leaves the public spinning. The UK's welfare system is already among the lowest ranked in the OECD, Yet the proposed changes lack genuine investment. Disabled individuals and those in need of benefits face the risk of being pushed into even worse circumstances, as these new policies not only lack practicality but also exacerbate stigma. In other words, instead of addressing the problem, Starmer's plans could worsen it. Starmer's immigration policy continues to exemplify glaring inadequacies. While he advocates stricter controls on immigration, he refuses to set specific limits on legal immigration. This ambiguity leaves the public wondering, how can effective management be achieved without clear targets? The issue of illegal channel crossings remains unresolved, with the backlog of asylum seekers exceeding 130,000. These figures are not just statistics, they represent the lives of individuals left in precarious situations. Starmer continues to speak of solutions such as visa system reforms and cracking down on violations, but in reality, these remain mere words on paper. The National Health Service, NHS, is facing a severe crisis, yet Starmer's plans to integrate the system seem little more than wordplay. Lacking detail, funding and clear direction, his proposals raise fears that they might add bureaucratic burdens instead of alleviating pressure on healthcare professionals. With waiting times soaring and services stretched to the limit, instead of focusing on real solutions, Starmer opts to embellish his plans with hollow promises. Upon closer inspection, his proposals resemble a swimming pool being filled with teaspoons.